Hey everyone, welcome everyone listening and thanks for joining us. I'm Maria Prieto and I'm really thrilled to be sitting down with these two cinematographers today. Before I introduce them though, I want to hold the moment of silence that we do before each conversation. We started holding these on our first roundtable and we just address all the lives that have perished because of COVID. And it's really shocking every time I go back to moderate and I just see the numbers just go up we all know it's just the deaths are just rising too quickly, but let me go back to my script. We're gonna hold a moment of silence to honor all 1,546,009 reported worldwide COVID deaths as of today. And that's 280,135 here in the US alone. We'd also like to honor all of our Black and Brown brothers and sisters, as well as our First Nations brothers and sisters, whose lives have been taken by the hands of police brutality and other senseless acts of violence. Thanks, guys. Like I said, we've been holding these from our first roundtable, and now we're kind of in another lockdown, but I know people are still working, and you have to do it with utmost safety in mind and just an awareness and an empathy for everyone around you. So yeah, now I want to introduce these two wonderful people we have joining us, these two cinematographers. We have Julia Swain and Oren Soffer, both joining us from LA. So I will be the applause, the audience applause. Seriously, welcome to Film Roundtable, and thank you both for taking the time to, to share some of your experiences with us.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for having us.
I'm gonna end up leaving you guys to talk for a while, but before I, leave for a bit, I would love to hear a little bit about how you ended up here. That first time you picked up a camera, what you felt and how it kind of led you down this path. So Oren, could you start?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know when the exact Rubicon was crossed. I was into films since I was like 5 years old, and grew up watching a ton of movies. Eventually had the light bulb moment of like, people make these and you can actually be on a set and be behind a camera and behind the lights and all these other things that go into the process. I think it was behind the scenes for the Star Wars Special Edition, if I remember correctly. They released like a CD-ROM that you could watch in your computer and it had a ton of behind the scenes. And it was like, oh my God, all the cameras and all the behind the scenes stuff really captured me. And the Lord of the Rings DVDs, I think, also played a big part. But basically started sort of making movies in high school with friends on mini DV, and we had a little film class in high school as well, sort of this off the beaten path extracurricular, and yeah, that was it. I was already DPing at that time without realizing it, sort of starting to be behind the camera and think about placement, and read a bunch of books that are still great. 5 C's of Cinematography and the blue directing book with the hands. I don't know what it's called, but I think everybody has that book. Yeah, shot by shot. That's right. No, that's definitely it. And yeah, so that sort of just gradually ramped up. I went to NYU, started DPing more seriously, I suppose, student films and little music videos. Most of that work is crap now, I think, but yeah, I graduated and just started DPing professionally slowly since then, and still feel like I'm slowly climbing up the ladder since then. But that's pretty much the story.
Did you find any mentorship at NYU? Like once you graduated, how did you kind of find the door opening?
Yeah, I interned on a few shoots with Reed Morano during school, which was really great. It was during the summers in between semesters, but I did a few features with her she had this really great sort of unofficial internship program, I suppose, where she was bringing on film students to work in the camera department. I learned so much from that. It was my first time experiencing like a professional film set in any capacity that was not a student shoot. So that was really important for me at the time. And since graduating, I don't know. I've always been a little self-conscious. I don't think I've ever had like an official mentorship with anybody, though that would be nice. But it's sort of just been a hodgepodge of really great people along the way who've been responsive and that I've been able to kind of forge relationships with naturally and organically. But nobody at any point was like, come here, you're gonna be my person and I'm gonna show you the ropes and help you climb the ladder and get jobs and all that. So I think there's always been a support network, and but it's mostly been finding my own path, I suppose. But I mean, the best thing that emerged in that realm in general was just relationships with other DPs, like my friendship with Julia, which has been amazing. And I think that's like the best thing that has sort of come about in the last few years in terms of sort of like self mentorship of each other. Like it's just a support system that's been really great.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I like how you pointed out that Reed, had this unofficial mentorship program, especially for those listening. Julia directed this short documentary called Lady Cameraman, which is, focuses on all the cinematographers that are female in this industry. So to hear about this, woman, this fantastic cinematographer woman who wants to keep opening that door, not just for other women, but for young DPs with talent, because at the end of the day, like it's talent, So going off that, Julia, why don't you tell us a little bit about, your start and a little bit of your history?
Yeah, I was addicted. Again, like Oren, don't really know a specific moment in time where I had that realization. There was always a camera around for like childhood home videos and things that my dad was holding, and I became sort of addicted to using it. And I think I made movies in high school too. I have never worked in any other industry. Like I worked in a movie theater when I was 15. I worked in news because that was the only job in my small town where you could actually get paid to use a camera, and like became really good at operating there. And I made movies in high school. And I think too, like I do remember getting my hands on like editing software and realizing that how you could piece stories together and stuff, and that sort of magic. And obviously like all the BTS featurettes and things like that, just wanting to be part of that magic and that sort of process. And then I went to UCLA for cinematography specifically, and I can't do anything else. It's all I love to do. So yeah, I've never sort of ventured it. I think there was a moment where I like tried to do medicine because I was like, I'm not going to like make money doing this. And then I like failed the class and went right back to filmmaking for like a quarter or something. But, but yeah, it's always been the thing that I wanted. And I somehow knew that when I was younger.
And did you feel supported, by family, by everyone around you to, go down that path? Or
yeah. And I think that's a really important point too, is like I was never told that I couldn't do it. I was told I could be anything I wanted because I was hardworking and I cared and I wanted to love what I did. And I think that mentality, having that told to you from an early age, is really important and sort of empowers you to really pursue what you want and not make you feel like you have to do something specific that might not be your sort of natural instinct. So.
My parents were sort of what I call hands-off supportive. They, at the time, they were sort of like, yeah, I mean, I guess you can go. They were skeptical that this was a viable career, but
Sure.
they weren't getting in the way. But I mean, I remember in high school, like my friend who I sort of had a best friend at the time who is actually still a DP. He wasn't he was more directing at the time, but we would make all of our films together, the two of us.
Oh, cool.
And his mom would drive us all over the place. Like
she was your production.
Essentially, in hindsight now, I realize. I mean, she was transpo, crafty,
yeah,
and all. But at a certain point, she got annoyed because she was like, Oren, why don't your parents ever like drive you around for the film shoots and stuff like
Oh
that? And I'm
no.
like, I can't make them do that.
Yeah.
They were uninterested in being that supportive, I suppose. But I mean, that was fine. It's just funny thinking about it now in hindsight. It's not like it was a big deal. It's
Yeah.
just a different approach.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine were the same way. And they were very much like, you need to sort of find this path and you need to do the research as to like how this is going to work long term, I think. So
yeah. Yeah, that's
but,
interesting to think about. I don't know.
Yeah.
It feels like so much time has passed, and I don't know. Do you feel like do you feel like you're set? Like, do you feel like this is it? Like, I'm a DP now. I'm done. Like, I'm on the road, or like, I don't know. Do you?
I don't know
How
if
do you
I
feel
feel
about that?
set, but no, yes, absolutely. I'm full-time DP now and there's no going back. And I feel
Yeah.
like, yes, I feel like I've done the work to get myself in that position, I guess, where it's like I can do this consistently and I don't feel the need to like try and supplement or, do something else that isn't as fulfilling. So
Right.
did
It's
you feel,
self-sustaining.
yes. Did you feel like when you got in film school, there was like yes, I'm doing something right. And now I get to go like study this specifically? Was like, did film school in New York feel like a milestone to like your younger self in a way?
Yeah. I mean, it did, but this is what's funny is in hindsight, it feels so naive. Like
Of course.
along the way, right? That's the thing. Along the way, each one of these things felt like a milestone. But I guess what I was getting at with the other question was like, I feel sometimes like I'm like, am I on the right path? I mean, DPing is not in terms of like, am I on the right path for DPing, but it's like, am I where I want to be with my career goals?
Right
And
now.
am I doing the stuff? Yeah, like where I am right now. It's sort of just like as I'm on the journey towards doing like shooting the stuff that I want to shoot and working on the projects that I want to work on. I fluctuate between feeling really confident about what I've done so far and how far I've come in the past few years and so on. And then on the flip side is like looking ahead at where I want to be and it feeling so far away. And I don't know, that dichotomy always pushes and pulls sometimes. But then when I take a step out of it, it does feel, I do feel good about it. And I can identify the milestones along the way.
Right.
And film school at the time was huge because I didn't grow up I grew up in the States when I was a smaller kid, but in middle school and high school, I was in Israel. So all of this felt very far away. It's like movies coming from across the ocean and watching the Oscars at 3 a.m. And there's a whole other lifestyle of being into film when you kind of live far away from even just the US. But knowing that I wanted to be a part of it and then getting to film school, that was like a huge monumental thing at that time. I was like, I'm moving to New York City and I'm here and I'm surrounded by all these other people who also like movies. And it felt really, really monumental. And then in hindsight, now that I think back on it, it's sort of like, oh, I was so naive and didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing when I graduated from film school. And it took a couple of years of figuring out even just how to build a career. I mean, no, I guess a little shade to film schools, but not intentional. It's not their fault. I don't know about UCLA. I'd be curious to hear actually, but I did not leave NYU really super prepared for career building.
No.
Okay.
there was I mean, there's so much you don't talk about in film school that you're then left to sort of fend for yourself and figure out. So I agree. And it's funny because when you graduate or you get to that point of like a new chapter, you're like, my reel was so hilarious when I got here. And now I'm like the big shit. And then, and now looking back at that, I'm like, I didn't know what I was talking about. Like I did not, so I think it's like, and I probably think it will always be that way,
I
like
think so.
yeah.
No, I think you're right. I don't know. The talking about the mentorship thing. I mean, again, I always wished I had like an official mentor, but it's been okay. But there have been a few people along the way who've been, and still now obviously, who are very supportive and always there for questions and just to bounce thoughts and ideas off of. And those people, I feel like, all consistently say, and these are people who are more established,
Yeah.
they all consistently say the same thing, where it's like, you're never really satisfied.
Right. And those people, I'm in your same boat of just like, there's a bunch of mentors that, answer those questions. And those people are the ones that sort of fill those gaps of like, what do I do when I go into an interview? What do I, like all these different things that you don't really talk about in film school. Those, mentors sort of filled those gaps, I guess, for me.
That's good.
Like,
how did you like find them? How did it come about, some of these relationships, do you think?
I think it was, I guess I would say it starts from like knowing what work I like or things that I'm drawn to, like films I'm drawn to, or, we had a great program where we'd have a very, very established DP like Dan Mindel or Mandy Walker or somebody come in and stay with us for the year and come throughout the year and teach us very hands-on things. And so you build relationships from that. I think that is one great thing about the education, was like being connected to that network. But yeah, all kinds of ways, crossing paths in random ways, and just getting to know the people that you sort of feel connected to in the work a little bit. How about you?
Yeah, the UCLA thing is so funny because we were always so jealous of that. I think USC does something similar where they have a DP in residence or something, but we had some great cinematography professors. I don't want to kind of downplay that, but they were New York based and they sort of came from the New York TV world.
Gotcha.
So it was a little different. Like Jeff Erb, he was the main guy, the big ASC guy at NYU. He passed away, unfortunately, but he shot Law and Order for a bunch of years and stuff like that. So he's a legend in the New York TV world. We always felt pretty separate from like the LA ASC,
like movie world,
Galaxy, the movie world. So so it was cool to have people like Reed around. I mean, Reed came about because this was in 2012, I think, or 11. So it was sort of early days. I mean, she had done Frozen River and Shut Up and Play the Hits. I think it just come out, but I think she wasn't as well known in the industry at large, or at least the kind of film student level of the industry at large as she is now. But a few of us knew who she was, like a couple of people. And she came and spoke in one of her classes because she's an NYU alum. One of the professors brought her in. And then we just went up and talked to her afterwards. And I think that's sort of been the case in general. It's like, it's honestly just been reaching out to people organically. Like, and I think the thing has always been is just remembering that, like, we're all just folk, like we're all just people, we're all just DPs. The whole pedestal deity demigod kind of thing has never been my thing in terms of treating other people like in that way. And I think especially for DPs who are not used to a ton of attention, that gets even weirder when people sort of treat them that way, because they're like, why am I on a pedestal? Like, I'm just behind I'm just the weird nerd behind the camera. Like, I don't know why people are treating me this way. Like, anytime you go to the ASC open house or something, you see Roger Deakins like
lines of
but he's like uncomfortable in the corner. Like, no, I just want to be a wallflower and be left alone. But anyway, it's funny, and it's the film school thing it's sort of one of the downsides, I guess. Like, I get why it happens, but I think I always felt it in NYU, at least, this pull between like you want to create a really supportive, creative environment where everybody's ideas are encouraged, and the focus is on the work, and nothing's invalid and nothing is wrong, and so on and so forth, which is a great creative environment for people to create a ton of work and learn and grow and make mistakes. But it sort of shields you from reality a little bit, where there are all these other factors to consider in terms of the industry and the way it functions and stuff like that. And they sort of tried to introduce a little bit of that. We had a few professors who would go rogue, I guess, and bring in speakers like, oh, these are some working commercial directors, or this great. Is a DP who shoots commercials, or there was this one class where you just bring in random people who are working in the industry, like an AD and grip or whatever, and they would just talk a little bit about working, but it still feels so removed. When you're still in the learning environment, it feels so separate.
Yeah.
Until you actually get out there and do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you think you would have gotten to where you are now if you didn't go to film school?
It's tough to say because I only know this narrative that I've lived, but I don't think so, because again, it's about the people, and I don't know. I think, going back to what we sort of both said about like, crossing paths organically and getting to know people, so authentically, I wouldn't have probably had as many situations and just interactions with, people that I wanted to learn from if I hadn't gone. I would have sort of had to like force my way in a bit more. So
yeah,
no, I don't think so. and again, you got to make mistakes, and we got to shoot all the time. That was what was great about it, is like you just shoot, and that's what matters. It's not grades. It's not, that's not even a thing. Like, it's just make movies. Do you feel like what you wanted at that time has shifted, or are you still after the same type of work? Like, I know you and I have talked a lot, and we probably know a lot of these answers, to be honest, but I feel like you and I both are very fortunate to do narrative work, I think, and like do a lot of, really profound storytelling. So I'm curious though, is that what you loved and knew at the time, and now where are you at?
I still think about this and question this a lot. Overall, yeah. I mean, the thing that I always wanted to do and that always drew me to filmmaking and cinematography was movies, and specifically, I guess, what would be referred to as art house movies. But I mean, I think I've become a little bit more lax with my pretentiousness about films as the years have gone on. Maybe it's time away from film school that I can sort of be like, yeah, I love the Fast and Furious franchise. Like, I don't have any issue admitting that. None at all. I genuinely love those movies, but and would love to work on something like that, or something like Mission Impossible. Or, I don't know if I really thought about that at the time, especially high school was really the formative time for me, which is when I like watched all of these films for the first time. Paul Thomas Anderson movies and Coen brothers. I mean, I'd always seen a few here and there, but that was the time when I actually sat down and understood what cinema was, and actually started watching, Vertigo and Chinatown, and just all these great films, and really fell in love with the art form. And so that was always my North Stars, is that kind of those kind of films. And when I graduated film school, well, that's the thing, is at that time it feels so distant, because you're making these short films at film school, and some of them could be good, but none of them really are really super profound. At least, I did undergrad, right? You did grad school. So I'd actually be curious to hear if the films you worked on were any different. The films I tended to work on, and this is, again, no shade to anybody, but everybody was 20, 21. So you're not, bringing a ton of life experience to the films that you're making. And I think I worked on some stuff that I was really proud of at the time, and some stuff that I guess I think I'm still, I can look back on now and sort of see little nuggets of like, oh, that's not bad and that's not bad, but they definitely weren't at the level and quality of the films that I liked. And so that feels like a very long-term trajectory, especially when I just graduated from school. It feels so distant. And you're like, oh, the first goal is even just to shoot some indie films. Like even that alone feels like this Herculean task to climb this mountain of like, how do I even shoot anything, a feature of any kind at any budget level? And the bigger stuff felt so far off, and it still does, to be honest. But after graduating, I did sort of discover the commercial world, which I had zero connection to in film school at all. It was like a bad word that you couldn't say. You couldn't say the C word at NYU. It was all about films and short films and auteurs.
Telling your story. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, again, I get, and that's great, and that's fine. I think that has changed in the years since I've been there. There's a little bit more not emphasis on it, but a little bit more presence of it, I suppose. But because I talk to students there now who are very aware of the commercial world and the short form world in general, and Vimeo and what's going on and all these things that I truly had no clue. I mean, I was sort of lucky, I guess, that I had in my class, we weren't in the same year, but we were in the same senior camera class. Stuart Weinkoff, who's this incredible commercial fashion DP, now photographer too, and his photography is amazing too. And he and his brother started doing commercials, even in film school. And he came in, he actually used one of our class times to shoot a spec, because we had this random component of this camera class where our professor would just bring in a Phantom camera, and every week everybody got to sort of shoot something on the Phantom.
That's cool.
Yeah, and most people, not knowing what to do with any of this stuff, were just like, okay, let's just, I don't know, throw some things at each other in slow motion. Like there was no plan. But Stuart came in with a script. He's like, I'm going to shoot a spec. It's going to be this bow and arrow thing, and there's glitter on it, and it's flying everywhere. And I was sort of looking at that in awe of, I would have never even thought of doing something like that at the time. In hindsight, that was so smart. Like, I really wish I did more of that.
I wish, same.
Yeah, that's my biggest regret, honestly, is not doing, or just not even having any awareness of like short form stuff, really, commercials, spec commercials.
Yeah, and now I feel like people are known for that stuff. And I think it accelerates a lot of people's trajectories, which can be great. I mean, there's pitfalls, but in hindsight, of course, I don't think it would have affected where I am now. Like, I ended up getting here anyway. It maybe just took a few different roundabout ways, but narrative has always been sort of like the end goal, though. I do love commercials, and I think they're super fun and low stakes and bigger budgets. I mean, there's a lot of advantages. I understand the cynicism behind it, and I also understand the moral ambiguity of it, sort of supporting this capitalist system. Like, I think about that sometimes. I mean, there's certain brands I wouldn't work for, I suppose. Right. I'm sure you're the same. There's lines in the sand. But yeah, my ultimate dream would be to do both, and to shoot like a feature a year or a short TV show or something, and then commercials. That's sort of the end goal. Yeah, but I think that's one of the coolest aspects too of our, I mean, now we're both there, but it's like being able to balance, right? Like we we'll both do a feature, and then we'll have a couple commercials or music videos and things. And like being able to like jump from different format to different format is really great in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. I wish I was doing more of both, I suppose. But I mean, it's extraneous circumstances this year, especially. But I don't know. Have you ever felt? I've certainly been in situations where I'm working on a feature and then some great commercial opportunity comes along and I feel really bummed about it, that I have to pass. Have you been in that position? Like, how do you? I agree. Like, I feel the same way. The balance is really great, but do you feel also the pull between the two? How do you kind of navigate in between that?
Yeah. Yes, I feel like it's getting better. I think in the beginning it was like you're so afraid that you're going to get another phone call while you're on something, because you do more to put food on the table. You know what I mean? You're trying to like make this a thing and shoot a lot of different things. And now, yeah, I like last year, actually, I had like a whole month of commercials, like in Paris and in different places.
Mm.
And I was going to make, you know, more than I'd ever made. And it was like so eye-opening that my commercial career was really taking off. And then I got a call for a movie. I was like, it took me a moment, but I was like, bye commercials. Like I wanted to do the movie. And I think now it's become, and there's aspects of that hurt, you know what I mean? That, you know, you're giving something up obviously, and like, you know, you're making decisions between things. But I feel like now my rule is I'm not going to be on something unless I absolutely love it. And I will not regret if someone calls me for something else. I'm not going to feel bad. So I'm only going to take it if like, you know, this is what I want to be doing, and try to avoid feeling any remorse for like giving something else up or something.
Yeah,
but yeah,
that's
this
good.
year is sort of different, obviously, than, you know, last year, where I was sort of learning to balance that more. But yeah, how's this year been for you?
Honestly, terrible.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you got to shoot that movie though and stuff, and you got to,
Thank God.
yeah.
Yeah, that was really that was I don't even know if I would call it a silver lining. That was like a saving grace. That's what I'm looking for. I think, yeah, this year hit really hard for a lot of people. I think we've discussed this before. I've talked about this with some other DPs who are sort of in the same place that we are in our careers, which is like on the way
Mm-hmm.
to our goals and established at a certain level, but still a way to go. And it really felt, especially at the beginning of this year, like the bottom just fell out of like finally feeling over the last couple of years that I was actually gaining some momentum, and then it just disappeared completely and hasn't really recovered since. Even since shoots resumed, things have still been really, really slow, and it's okay. Like, there's extraneous circumstances, obviously. The industry has not gone back to full or even half capacity as to what it was. But I think it just hit really hard. I certainly don't envy DPs who are just starting out and entering into this world,
Right.
but I do think there is still sort of a you know, it's going to be rough anyway. It's going to be challenging when you're just starting, and you're looking for really tiny shoots within your network anyway, that I feel like are things that could still happen. And then obviously anybody who's already established enough at a level where I feel like, I guess they don't need to solicit work, like it just comes to them. And they're shooting projects that are big enough that they can afford to sit around for 6 months, and that's sort of normal and okay.
Yeah.
That's another category. And then we're sort of stuck in the middle here, where it was like, I do still feel like I have to work to get work. And having that bottom fall out was really rough. But yeah, the feature that I shot in October was really great to have that. Like, it's the one reason I don't feel super down about this year, is because I had that one project and it was 2 months and it was a prep and shoot. And it was really great to just have something to dive into. But even then, I had a couple commercials pop up during that. And I loved the project that I was working on. So I know exactly what you mean in terms of like, I like this project enough that I don't feel any regrets of turning anything else down, because I'm focusing on this thing now and it's good and I like it. But I always do still feel a little tinge of just a little pang of having to turn something down, only because I guess like I just said, I still feel like I have to work to get work. So any opportunity
you want to clone yourself and go do the commercial too.
Exactly, because that is also a good opportunity, regardless of whether or not it's like some big thing. I feel like any commercial at this point that has good creative and is with a director that I like is good. And I sometimes do feel this pull of like, I feel like commercials, sort of getting to the place where I want to be in the commercial world, which is shooting bigger projects with bigger budgets and brands and directors and longer shoots and all these other things, and bigger production companies, is sort of a full-time thing. Like I have to dedicate attention to that. But I also want to make movies. I also want to shoot features. And it's sort of figuring out how to spend the time, like within a year, how much time am I spending on each one, and making sure I'm not neglecting one or the other. But the features thing is sort of more of a long game, I suppose. It's always something that's felt out of my control. I'm curious how you feel about it, because I feel like I've gone through like 5 stages of confusion, grief, acceptance about like how to make features, not how to physically make them, but how to build a career doing that. And I feel like early on I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to like get in the right position to be called for features. And then as time went on, I've taken more of a hands-off approach and been like, the relationships that I build organically are the ones that over time will result in features, maybe, hopefully. I don't know. How do you view the whole thing? Like how hands-on with building a features career do you feel like you are or have to be in terms of pursuing opportunities and stuff?
Yeah, I feel as you do, like it is a bit out of my control. I feel like you sort of have to just, I also think there's crossover though. Like directors who are doing commercials and music videos, a lot of them want to do narrative and do narrative. So it's not, I don't think that like just because maybe someone feels like they're just doing commercials, they'll never meet that person who's going to take them onto a feature. Like I think there's definitely, people with stories that are directing short form. But yeah, I think, I'm always talking about how much I love narrative work, and I'm always expressing how that's, something that I love. So, I think just making that connection with people and finding out who also wants to make, feature length films. And I think you and I have shot about the same amount of features. And we both did one during the pandemic, which
and you shot one earlier this year too.
Yeah. It was right before yours, I think. I think we overlapped. I think we had like
it was sort of in the same.
Yeah.
Were we shooting at the same time? I didn't think about that. I can't remember if I was in prep when you were shooting yours, or if I was already shooting. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like I wrapped and you started, but
fun.
Yeah, and I think I at the beginning it was so many shorts, and I think that helped too, just like knowing directors who were doing short form and that wanted to either have feature versions of what they were making, or that was their goal as well. But yeah, it's just one of the many aspects that sort of feels out of my control for sure.
Yeah, I'm sort of a type A person, so letting go of control, it takes time. for me, but you really have to, I think, in order to pursue the features career. So much of it is out of your control, and that's where I've come fully around to the acceptance stage of just understanding that that's how it is, and that's okay. And we're still young compared to, I think, the people that you and I look up to in the features world. That takes years, and it takes time to sort of build up to that place, to get to the place where you're shooting at the level that you want to, I suppose. But actually, I am curious, like, what dream world, 5-10 years from now, I don't want to put a specific timeline on it, but what do you want to shoot? Like, what kind of stuff, or I guess going back to high school and film school and stuff, what kind of films inspired you, and were the type of movies that you pointed to and told yourself, that's the kind of stuff I want to make?
Yeah, I think in the very beginning it was like Jurassic Park and cool stuff like that, where it was like, how do they do this? I don't understand. I want to be on set with dinosaurs.
Yes.
And and then
still to this day.
Yeah, still I'd be okay with that. But I think I had a realization in when I was starting to study film, and that was, I saw Blue Valentine, which is like probably my favorite movie, and it's so simple, but just realizing that I really wanted to do stuff that delved into characters and like relationships and like people, I think was something that I realized. So I think it started out with sort of the more fantastical like stories that were huge and supernatural and things like that, but then it became more of and maybe part of me didn't even really know like what I wanted, because again, I didn't know commercial world. I didn't know all these things that you could do in your career that was still being a DP. But I think it became more of like, okay, I'm really drawn to these sort of dramatic character pieces and sort of pursuing those, because even in the genre work that I've done, it's like it's still really rooted in relationships, brother sister, husband wife, and like different things like that I think are really interesting. And in my dream world, I think television is something that I'm very serious about, because you get to dive into those things and you do it for longer, as opposed to a feature. And so yeah, I think it's similar. It's doing a movie a year or a show. I really want to shoot a season of a show, and but still have all these commercials and even music videos. I feel so high after a music video, because they're just like, it's so fun. Like you get to play, and I don't know, it's just, yeah. So having a balance, and I think bigger things, bigger budgets, bigger features in television for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's such good stuff on TV now. It's I don't even see a distinction anymore. Like, I'm sure most people feel the same way, but
yeah, but that's what's exciting to me, is like now the level of sort of experience and technique and all these things, and like the visual design of TV is at such a level now, and I think that challenge is really exciting. So
yeah, and you have all these mini series, which feels like something that's been really surging in the past couple of years, where one director will come in and sort of direct 6 episodes or 7 episodes of it, essentially just a long feature that then gets cut up into parts. But when you watch it, experience it, and assumedly make it, it feels the same. It's just part of the same world, just a higher page count, I suppose. But yeah, that stuff is so awesome. There's so many beautiful looking things on TV that I'm constantly sort of grabbing screen caps from for my reference library. The Outsider and Queen's Gambit and Euphoria, obviously, all these amazing shows. Yeah, so one day, still figuring out how to crack into that one, but
yeah, for sure.
we'll get there.
Mystery.
How was shooting during the pandemic? What was the experience like?
It was
for you, because it was different. My circumstances were different because you were shooting in LA, right?
Yeah. Shooting in general during the pandemic has been okay. I think you and I both done our Zoom shoots where we're sitting at our computer for 12 hours. We've done
Yeah.
those, the remote ones.
I only did one of those. It was weird, but
I think I only did one too, but it was the first
okay.
one during the pandemic. And I was like, this is the longest day on set I've ever had, and I don't like it. And I'm not
Yeah.
even on set.
No, I'm at home and it
Yeah,
feels,
but
it
it's
was
torture.
surreal. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
surreal.
because I think you and I are both very hands-on, and we're very
Oh
like,
yeah.
proactive on set and very involved in like running the show, with our AD and our director. So it's like sort of sitting there with everybody on the call is like, you can't have those separate channels of communication, and it's really interesting. But yeah, the feature was good. I mean, the feature was, a SAG feature, and it was the first, everything else had been commercial music video. And it's still, we had all the regulations, but when SAG was involved, it's obvious it's a new ball game. And approvals and things like that took longer. And we did the zones and everything. And I think the very first day I was like, they staggered call times, and I was like, I just want to go. Like, let me sign in and go. But I had to stand there until I could check in or whatever. But yeah, it was good. You get into the rhythm, and you guys, the protocol and everything becomes, zone, it's a red zone. And so it didn't really slow us down. It felt very like we were working at the speed we usually work, with all the precautions, and you get into a groove, and it felt safe. And I think, a thing I keep saying is like, I really do think we are proving we can do this safely. And, so it was a good experience. How about you?
That's great. Well, mine was different because we were shooting.
Canada.
We were in Canada, and we were shooting. We were in 4 hours north of Toronto, in a small town. So we did a bubble, like an NBA style bubble, where the cast and crew were all at the hotel. Nobody else is at the hotel. We had no contact with the outside world except for a runner that would get stuff and then drop it off in the sliding doors at the front of the hotel, sanitize and leave. And yeah, I mean, it was surreal in its own way, because we were sort of trapped in this shining hotel, and then only going to set and coming back. And that was just our existence for 2 months. But it was very safe as a result. I mean, even with the bubble, we still tested every week, and everyone wore masks and PPE, and we didn't have any positives at any point. So it worked. But it was definitely unique and easy enough for myself and the director and some of the other people, because we're young, I guess, not necessarily single, but family. No, we don't have families with us. I think it was a little rougher for some of the local crew who came up from Toronto and were leaving behind families and stuff like that. It's definitely not long-term sustainable, but for the short term, the bubble was definitely super safe. But yeah, it's challenging, and I know it was expensive for production too. So I feel for that.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Now it's a line item, and it becomes, we're having to bump up the budget to whatever degree it is based on people and stuff. So
exactly, and we're already working up on the edge of budgets, right? So it's tough. They either have to add more or things get sacrificed, and yeah, I don't know. Bigger budgets is definitely a long-term goal for me, for sure.
For sure.
Like I understand. I love independent films and lower budget films. I think there's like amazing stuff to be made in that world. And if the script is amazing, then it doesn't matter what the budget is, as long as it's matched well to the script. But long term, I'd love to work on bigger budget stuff, for like bigger films and stuff like that. I don't have any romanticism for staying in a small budget world as much as maybe some other people do. But I don't know. Do you feel that way too, or are you like, yeah, give me $100 million movie, I'm down?
Yeah, I definitely feel ready and capable and eager to
Yeah.
do the bigger things. Like, yeah, if you give me that today, I will totally execute and deliver. But yeah, I feel the same way. I love the spirit of independent film, and the intimacy of it. And, I think there's something to be said for smaller crews sometimes, and, efficiency in that degree.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely, I think you and I both strive for just a bit more to let us sort of play and execute things in, you know, with bigger scope maybe in that storytelling. So yeah.
And just being able to execute, like I always just feel really bad when I'm in a scenario where I sort of have to tell somebody like, we can't execute this thing. We just don't, we're unable to get the resources that we need to do that specific thing. So there's two choices, right? We can come up with a creative compromise, which I feel like is most of the job. And that's part of the fun part, coming up with creative solutions to things and finding lower budget ways to do things, right? But there is still an initial heartbreak when you come across an idea or a concept or a proposal and you're just like, well, we're not going to get the 50-foot techno crane. So we're going to have to come up with a different way to do this. And I don't know.
I want to ask you something. Does creativity,
ask me.
Does creativity thrive more when you're limited, or is there more creativity when you have more money and tools? Are you more creative then, or are you more creative when it's, here are the 3 lights or 2 lights and here's the, you know what I mean?
I think limitations are good when they are part of a plan and ahead of time. So if you set out to make a project and you say, okay, well, we have limited resources. What can we make within these resources? I think that can be a very creative and creatively stimulating scenario. And I feel like all of the lower budget projects that I've done that have been successful and been good were created within that framework. But on the flip side, I mean, on the feature that I shot, the feature that I shot was very ambitious and complex and technical and fun. But there were a lot of compromises that had to be made along the way for budget reasons, and they were heartbreaking. I felt like our creativity was being limited by the resources that we had access to. There were certain things that we were able to find creative solutions that worked, and there were certain things that we just had to give up on. And it wasn't even finding a solution for it. It was just, we just had to lose it. And that always feels really, really bad. Because I hate being the person who's the realist. Whenever, you know, I want to be the dreamer along with the director, but we sort of, the DPs that have to straddle that line where when we're hanging out with the director, we're the dreamers, but when we're hanging out with the line producers, we have to be the realists. And then we end up being the conduit between the two sometimes, often. So I think it's sort of both. Like when it's planned, it's good. I love setting creative limitations, like, oh, we only have certain focal lengths of lenses that we have to stick to, or we create a visual language. The feature that I did before this one actually was like that. It was very low budget, but like very low. But we set out with that in mind, and we were like, okay, we can't afford almost anything on this, but we have this amazing location that looks great with natural light. Okay, so we only need a tiny handful of lights. We had 4 units for the whole movie. I had a gaffer and a key grip. I had a first AC and a second AC. We had a full camera package, but we did not have any peripheral tools to move the camera. So when we sat down and shot listed, we already had those limitations. We have a handheld, we have a slider, we have sticks, and we have handheld. That's it. All of our visual language has to work within that framework. And we're lighting, it was a period piece, which lends itself to this approach, but our lighting was very naturalistic. So in the daytime, it's windows, at night, it's candles, and that's what we have. And it was great. That was all the film needed. But we were able to be creative within the framework of those limitations because they were planned around the budget and not the other way around. And I think that that's sort of the key distinction that I've found and bumped into sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the feature that I was finishing as you were starting, was very well married to its budget, and it was aware of itself, and wasn't trying to be something that was crazy technical or anything. And I think that's something great about just DP relationships, with you and I. Like, we can sort of talk about that and our expectations, and like how to sort of lean into the budgets. Like, you and I were sort of going back and forth in terms of like, the things we were running into on our sets individually. And you reminded me to sort of lean into that minimalistic approach, which I love anyway. So that was like, I think that's really great when it comes to just like being able to talk about these things together and sort of help each other navigate them.
Yeah, it's the best.
I have a question for both of you, and I want to start with you, Julia. But now that we're talking about features and both of you having a few under your belt, when you sit down to read a script, what are you most drawn to? Like, what is it on the page that really helps you decide that you want to tell this story?
I would say it's what's not on the page. What's really going on here, and understanding that, I think. I think it's, I think you can tell too pretty quickly. Like, there's many scripts I haven't finished because I just didn't connect to them. And I'm not going to sit there and try to force myself to get through all, 90 pages or whatever. But I think it's, I think something I look forward to is like rooting for the characters and really just sort of getting invested in them as individuals. And again, sort of wanting to know more about what's not written on the page, and what's really going on, I think is something that if I'm intrigued in what that could be, then I think it's something that's, really interesting. And again, going back to the character pieces and relationships, I think that's something that I really love capturing and figuring out the visual language for, when you have, an ensemble of people around a hero or whatever, and you're trying to, photograph those different dynamics, I think is something that I'm really drawn to.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Oren?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about that over the years. In film school, I would read scripts of films that I liked that you can find in all sorts of archives on the internet, sort of trying to understand what makes a good script on the page. How can you identify a good script in written form before it's a film? And that's something I still feel like I run into a lot. Like, I'll read a script that sometimes is sort of, I'll get through it. I have the same threshold as Julia. Like, if a script is boring or not engaging or something like that, and you find yourself distracted even while reading it, that's an easy kind of move into the pass pile. But if something does at least get you to the end of it, but you're still sort of left a little sort of like, well, I mean, this could be a good film. Like, I see a version of it in my head that's good, but I don't know for sure. That's where it can get a little bit more ambiguous. And I think maybe I'm still figuring out how to thread that needle. So I think that for me, what ends up clinching it is, this may sound a little cynical, but can I do something sort of interesting visually with it? And I think that is a big factor for me, not from a selfish place, but from a place of like, I want to be able to use the language of visual cinema in order to tell this story. Does this script, this director, this producer, like this whole combination on this project, are they interested in that? Or is that something that is, does this story lend itself to that kind of visual exploration? Is this director curious and interested in crafting imagery that can further the story and tell the story in a visually, aesthetically interesting way? And I think that ends up being a big deciding factor for me, just because there's certain imagery that I'm interested in, and then there's imagery that I'm less interested in. And I know Julia feels the same way about this, I think. Like, we're aesthetically attracted to the things that interest us in terms of camera, placement, lighting, shadow, all of these things. And it's sort of like, can I create that within this world? If yes, then this is something that I'm interested in. And if this is a script that is I don't know, it doesn't lend itself to that kind of visual exploration and is sort of iffy, I guess, then that's an easy pass. But I guess
a good test that I found is I read one on a plane and it distracted me from turbulence and I forgot I was on a plane and I was like, I should interview for this movie.
There you go. That's
I was
the
that
initial,
sucked in.
yeah, that's the initial filter, right? Like, does this script grab me enough that I get to the end of it without noticing that I've just read the whole thing in 45 minutes? That's the goal. That's the dream, to read stuff like that.
Yeah. Julia, earlier in the conversation, you guys were talking about film school, and Oren asked if you feel like you'd be where you are if you hadn't gone to film school. And it's hard to tell, obviously, but at the end of the day, it's the connections that you make in film school that are so important. But my question to you is, what advice would both of you, so I'll start with you, Julia, but what advice would you give high schoolers who are interested in applying to film school, or in your case, you went to grad school, but how do you make yourself stand out when you're applying to these programs?
When you're applying, I think, if you really want it, you will, I think, sort of trying to find a way to capture how much it means to you. I know that when you apply to school, and I went to undergrad for production also, so I've been like in a lot of, and I just applied to UCLA to like see if I could get in because it was cinematography specifically. But grad school is a whole different conversation. It's like AFI or any of those things. But I feel like really when you apply, you usually write like a statement of purpose or something of like, this is why I'm qualified. And I think really honing in on what you love about it and why you want that. And it's something that's really important to get across. And, if you have photographs or any visual portfolio, I think really, showing those and talking about who you are and where you come from. Because I think also that stuff makes us who we are as artists. So I think it's like, if you are good at telling your story and good at expressing why you want to pursue this thing, it's a no-brainer. That didn't make any sense, but Oren, what do you think?
It did. No, it absolutely did.
It made perfect sense. I mean, NYU undergrad, this is probably the case with most undergrads, doesn't require film experience. So
right.
The application, people can send in short films, but they can also send in photographs or short stories or pretty much anything creative that they've done.
Grad school didn't require that either. It was like
really
from all life. Yep.
Even the cinematography concentration.
Yep.
Wow. Very interesting. So they really taught you they're starting from baseline. Yeah, that's
I mean, I think it was a visual portfolio.
Sure.
It was like you had shot some stuff maybe, but like directors were like lawyers and all kinds of things. So I think it's like your story.
Right. Yeah. I guess NYU grad school for the overall program is the same. Most people there were like former bankers or physicists or all sorts of, everyone had a different background. Grad school is fascinating. But for undergrad, I think it's everything you said is spot on. It's like demonstrating intellectual and creative curiosity. I think that's the main thing, and just showing that in your statement or whatever you need to hand in these days. And the question behind the question was that, at least for me, I feel like the reason I needed film school was because I really thrived in that structure of being able to make mistakes and learn along the way and shoot all these student films without stakes or consequences. Like, that was really important and formative for me at that time, because I'm not a particularly, or especially at the time, maybe I've become more as time has gone on, but I was not a particularly social or gregarious person. And I always sort of envy and am awed by people who are able to sort of break into the industry without going to film school and without having that structure. Like, the people who just have the gumption and the sort of interpersonal skills and the ambition to find their own way is really inspiring to me and amazing. ultimately, I think that that's like the one piece of advice that I would give to like someone who is sort of at that crossroads deciding whether or not they need it, is it's like, if you thrive with the structure, film school has a ton of advantages in that regard. And obviously also you end up meeting, it just gives you that structure also to meet people and meet your future collaborators and forge these friendships and relationships and collaborations that are really important. But there's plenty of people who have forged their own way without it. And I'm impressed by that. And I don't think I could have without the structure.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me.
Earlier, you were both talking about this year and how it's been for both of you. And, it's safe to say that this year has been really tough. Especially, in the film industry where you're just jumping around from project to project and suddenly you're like, oh my God, it's been 3 years and I haven't had a vacation. But I'm curious, with so much downtime this year specifically, or just in downtime in general, Oren, I'll start with you, but how do you stay creative? How do you feel like you're still flexing those muscles?
I'll be honest, for a long time, I felt like I wasn't. Especially in the first lockdown in March, when everything just shut down. There was just no work and there was no work on the horizon. Everyone just closed everything and we're like, we'll see what happens in June. Those few months were really surreal. I sort of, I don't know. Julia and I spoke. I would talk to other people on the phone. I would go on little walks, play video games. I didn't touch my camera, like my personal stills camera, in months during that period. It was just collecting dust. It was very weird. I guess the one outlet of creativity that I tapped into that wasn't generating creativity, but absorbing creativity, was obviously just able to watch a lot more movies and TV shows, which I've still been doing as relative lack of work has been my life for the past couple weeks. So I just watch a ton of stuff, and there's so much good content out there, and being able to go back and watch classic movies on Criterion Channel, or even this is so random, but Peacock, the streaming network, has a ton of classic films on it, and HBO Max has a ton of classic films on it. Peacock is free. It's like no excuse why people shouldn't fire it up and watch Casablanca. So we have all this access, all this great material on television, specifically just on Netflix and FX and all these other channels. So that's been the one thing that I've sort of clung to even more than in previous years. And something that I've always been surprised at how few people do. I share my sort of viewing list every month of movies that I've watched. And sometimes I'll get replies where people are like, well, I don't know, I'm so impressed that you have the time. I haven't watched a movie in 3 months. And I'm just like, how do you, this is from filmmakers. And I'm just like, I don't know how you thrive in this industry and feed yourself creatively without watching movies all the time or TV shows. I don't know. So that's always been important to me. I was always struck by that, even in film school, like the people who would sleep in the back of the room while we were watching, Metropolis or whatever, because it's a boring black and white movie. And I was always like, why are you here? Why did you go to film school if you're not interested in film? But anyway, I'm digressing. But that was the main outlet, was consuming, soaking up. The Artist's Way, which is a great book that I recommend to everybody, especially in these times. I think Julie, we've talked about it. She talks about creativity as a well that you have to refill. And I think that if there is a silver lining in this terrible time, tragedy, this isn't to diminish the tragedy of loss and everything, but to take away a personal silver lining for us in the industry, is this has been really crucial time for people to refill their well. And I think, like you were saying, Maria, some people have been working 3 years without vacation, or however long. Some workaholics in this industry just go, go, go. I think this time is really valuable for that, and I hope people, I guess, take advantage of it while we can, and also as an outlet to not wallow in the sort of sadder, more depressing aspects of this whole thing.
Yeah. Julia, what about you? What kind of projects do you immerse yourself into between projects?
I don't really do anything but cinematography, but I feel like I need more hobbies. But
yeah, same.
Yeah.
Well, I picked up cooking. That's been great.
I did cook a little bit, which is a shocker for me. So that was good.
And you got a pet, and you got
yeah, we got a quarantine puppy. That was a good project. Which ultimately I was going to say, I feel like, and Oren and I hiked with him and everything, and like going on these hikes and like just observing life in general, not on set, helps you be more creative, and having friendships and talking and listening. And I think that is part of staying creative. But yeah, I've been watching a lot more and soaking in as much, and Oren and I will text all the time about shows and things like that. So I've just been trying to watch a lot of things. I haven't touched I have many stills cameras and I have not touched them. I don't know why. I don't like going out and making a project for myself stills wise, because then I feel like I'm not really observing the world. I've done a couple commercials where I've traveled the last few months, and I would go ahead of time and like go explore just on my own. So like botanical gardens or like different towns, or like I would just try to sort of go and see different places. Cause again, we've been stuck in our homes. So when I had an opportunity to go out, or, I drive up the coast a lot, or I just try to be in different environments too, and like observe life. So yeah, that's about it, I would say.
That is really good.
One last question I have with both of you involves social media, and Oren, you touched on the fact that you'll release, like your watched films every month, which I love. I always check out what you've been looking at. But I'm curious, you both have a pretty big presence on social media, and as DPs, how have you used it, either as a calling card or for your advantage? Oren, why don't you start?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's basically, I see it as a sort of live updating version of my website, essentially. Like you can see my work sort of in a vacuum if you go to my Vimeo or my website or whatever, the agency website. Like there are multiple versions of my portfolio that exist out there for anybody who wants to see it or check past work or something like that. But because of the perpetual nature of social media, the feed, it is sort of an updating, a constantly updating version of that, where, and more than that, it's also a window into me, because I think, especially nowadays, like all DP work is good. I mean, I think everybody at a certain level can make good images, especially with the tools that we have access to nowadays. So I've always felt that what separates DPs from each other, in addition to their unique perspective and aesthetic taste and all of that, is also just who they are as a person. I think that's something really important to me when working with directors or producers or production companies or whoever it is and the crew that I hire is hiring good people. I always want to be surrounded by just people that I would like to hang out with, not on set. And that's sort of always the ideal. And I think creates the best working environments, because you don't feel like you're ever bumping up into workplace issues personality wise, which is important for 12-hour days on end. So I think that, social media is a great way for people to sort of do both. I can share my new work, I can share my old work, I can share the things that I'm interested in, I can share my photography, which is a hobby, obviously. And also, like Julia, something I haven't been doing much of lately. I've been taking more pictures on my phone than anything, even just while walking around like my neighborhood or whatever. But also a window into myself and my hobbies and interests and personality, I suppose. Like I don't really hide anything, I guess. I don't have a personal Instagram account. Like I sort of use my Instagram for both, for better or worse. and I encourage more people to do that. Like I think there's a lot of pages out there that are just work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at them and I'm like, but who are you? Who is this person? That's what I would look for if I were looking to hire somebody. So I'm hoping that other people feel the same way when they're looking to hire me.
No, it is interesting you say that, because that is something that I love about your page, is that it's not only beautiful in the imagery that you're sharing, but it's a human behind it, you know. And so many DPs that I follow on Instagram are just like, I don't know one single thing about them or like what they're about. But with you, I feel like I genuinely, you know, get a glimpse into your thinking about life, which again is really important when you're looking to hiring someone. Is, can I like this person? Do I like who they are as a human?
I would hope so, yeah.
Oh, what about you, Julia?
Yeah, I think just echoing what Oren said, I think someone asked me recently, who's starting out, they were like, do I just post screen grabs, or can I like post I'm at the beach and things? And I was like, you should do both, because you know, it is welcoming and humanizing, and you know, you personify this work that, you know, that you're posting, and it's like, I want to know who's behind that. And I think that ultimately invites people, and that's what we connect on. We connect on work, but it's like we really connect on like who we are and what we believe in and what we want to say. So I think yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what Oren said. Is just sort of, I try to balance both. I should probably do more. I feel like I should post more human experiences. I don't have the Instagram energy or amazingness that Oren has. Like I'm always impressed by his just social media presence, and you know, the amazing things that he just keeps up with a lot of things. And I'm not as good at posting, but I feel like, yeah, it's an extension of our portfolios, and it's another, you know, you get jobs from Instagram. It's a thing. So just being able to, and also Oren and I have talked about consistency. You know, you want a bit of consistency on your Instagram as you do your website, and you know, you want it to embody the work that you want to do, and you know, have that be an extension of who you are. So I think that's also important.
Yeah, it's still curated.
Yeah.
Certainly the stuff that appears in the feed, I think the stories function is great because of its disappearing nature, and I feel like I can be more casual with that. But yeah, I definitely probably spent too much time on it. I don't even spend that much time on it anymore. I just I don't really have anything else going on, so. But it has advantages. It's true. I mean, people do hire off of it. I don't love that fact, but it is true. So, you know, we have to kind of go where people are. You have to meet people where they are. And I do really think that because there's so much good work out there, this is the way to stand out and to make sure people know who you are, in addition to the fact that you can make good images, because a lot of people can make good images these days.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank both of you so much for, you know, sharing this time with us and sitting down and, you know, just talking with one another. Before we log off, I want to thank the rest of the team at Film Roundtable, Aaron Wild, Doug Torres, and Matthew Wolf, who, you know, do so much behind the curtain. And we also have Dominique McBride, who is our intern, who's fantastic. Thank you to everyone listening for your support. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast, follow us on Instagram, keep up with us on the website. And that's all we got. We'll see you guys soon.
Awesome.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.